kicking off day one of our spring ELO-P Academy, and happy to be here with you all. I'm going to go over a few just announcements and housekeeping to get us started before we introduce our speakers for today. So today's agenda, thank you for joining us on time, and thank you, Heather, for grounding us for a few moments. In a few moments, we will begin our workshop session. So today we're focusing on ELO-P, Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, Nuts and Bolts, Volume 3. This will be building on what we covered in our Fall 2023 Academy, if you attended that. And so Heather and Sterling will be facilitating that part of our session today. And then we will have some time for just a few closing comments and a few reminders on how to stay connected with the system of support for expanded learning. And then we'll transition to open up regional breakouts. And this is an opportunity for folks to connect with their regional teams and lift any key points or any questions based off of the content for today. And also an opportunity just to network with folks who are serving youth in their communities, but within your specific region. And then the Zoom will end at 12 p.m. today. That's the close of our session. Folks can just stay in their breakout room, and we'll close the meeting for today while you're in that. And we'll provide a few warning messages so that way it just doesn't cut off any conversations that you might be having. If folks have not registered, we still have day 2, 3, and 4. So day 2 is tomorrow, Thursday, April 4th, where we'll be focusing on running a single comprehensive expanded learning program. Day 3 will be on April 16th. So please make that note that it's not a consecutive day type of academy this year. And we'll be focusing on understanding ELO-P reporting and compliance monitoring, which is a really important piece of running high quality programs. So you definitely don't want to miss that. And then we will close with our final session on Thursday, April 18th, where we will focus on CBO, community-based operations, and LEA, local educational agency partners to support high quality ELO programs. And so there's still time. Register for those so that way you don't miss out on the conversations that we'll be having. And then if folks are interested, we are in the middle of spring ELO-P office hours. This is a great place to learn of any updates from the California Department of Education, and also lift any of those questions that are more like in the weeds that are specific to your programs in your community. So you can register with that bit.ly or scan the QR code. Our next session is, I believe, this Friday, and then we'll end in May. So don't want to miss those. And then next slide, connect with us, stay connected. You can scan our QR code to get all the updates all in one place. And you can also follow the California AfterSchool Network on all of our social media platforms. And then you will see this slide throughout the next few days as we facilitate our Spring Academy, but it is super important for folks to stay connected with our SSEL, our System of Support for Expanded Learning. You can see the graph there of all the regional representations, regions 1 through 11. So you can scan the QR code, and you can also, we'll drop the bit.ly in the chat where you can connect with your System of Support for Expanded Learning. All right, and now it is my pleasure to introduce Heather Williams, our Director for Policy and Outreach from the California AfterSchool Network, and Sterling Williams, our consultant from the Expanded Learning Division, who will facilitate the conversation that we'll have next on ELO-P Nuts and Bolts Volume 3. And so we'll transition to getting Heather and Sterling spotlighted for everyone, and we'll get going with the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Hey, everyone. yeah, we're just gonna jump right in. So as Melissa said, Heather Williams and with the California After School Network, and Sterling and I are excited to be talking to you all again about ELO-P nuts and bolts. This is volume 3. And so as Melissa mentioned, this is building on volume 1 and 2 that we shared during the last 2 academies. Some of the information, if you've been at all of our academies, you're going to look at it and say, that looks familiar. Hopefully it does, right? So we'll be building on it. Some of the information will be the same. There might be some slightly new information or refined information. So even if you've heard the spiel again, hopefully this maybe something new catches your attention as we go through the slide deck today. So we're going to cover a few things. Broadly, what is expanded learning and how it's funded, the basics of ELO-P, and then ELO-P elements and expectations, and a few resources. And then, as Melissa said, we'll be closing and transitioning to regional breakouts. And so we would, this is much more enjoyable if you all participate, right? Sometimes, again, this can be basic content. And so it's helpful if we can all learn together. So we would encourage you all to engage in the chat. Thanks to everybody that already has been. Please share ideas, thoughts, resources, promising practices. Feel free to continue to engage and chat in the chat box. It's open, so you all can chat with one another and respond to one another as well. We're going to have a few polls throughout and reflection questions. And so we'll have specific prompts for you all to think about. And then again, we really encourage you to join the facilitated regional breakouts at the end. This is a great opportunity, in particular, if you are not familiar with the system of support for expanded learning. You get to connect with your regional team, meet them, learn about them, the opportunities that they have available to support you. And then just have a conversation about what you learned today. And so just inviting you all to think about a couple questions as we go through the content today. So just thinking about what stands out as we go through, take note of anything that might be new to you, specific quotes in particular, if there's anything that is inspiring for you. Hopefully some of this content will help you think about your work and your role, maybe shift or impact something you are doing. And then consider what strategies from today you might implement within your own expanded learning programs. And then we, Melissa covered some of these, but just want to highlight, right, like an hour goes by quick in terms of content, and you'll have about 35 minutes with your breakout team, regional teams and breakouts. So that'll go by fast too. So you might have a lot of technical in the weeds questions that come up. And we like the technical in the weeds questions. It helps us think, it helps us refine how we share out about this program. But a lot of times in a space like this, we're not always able to get to it. And so we do recommend, right, the CDE FAQs continue to grow. They're a great resource. Office hours, as Melissa mentioned, is a really great opportunity. So if you have a really technical question, that's a good space to dig into that. There's the CDE help desk where you can email and follow up with questions. As mentioned, you can engage with the system of support for our regional teams. And then we also have fireside chats that Michael and I co-host, and those we dig into particular topics, but then also often bring on our LEAs and CBO partners to talk about some of the work that they're doing and give more specific examples of what these programs look like in action at the local level. All right, Sterling, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Heather. Great to be here. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sterling Williams. I'm with the Expanded Learning Division of CDE. I am a fan of 10 o'clock workshops. So hopefully everyone here is awake. They've had their coffee. We had a little bit of mindfulness. So we're present and ready to learn. We're going to start off here just kind of talking about what expanded learning is and really how it's prioritized within the state of California. So you'll see here our state superintendent of public instruction's initiatives and priorities, all of which are designed to support schools and educators and the students that we serve, right? This is a circle to symbolize how all these are interconnected and can support one another. And you'll notice on the left in the purple, that's expanded learning. So all of these are priorities that are really designed to transform California schools. And these are initiatives that have been taking place over the last several years. And we're proud to have expanded learning programs as a priority. So something I want to point out for this slide is the vision, right? And I want you to keep this in mind as we get into ed code and what the definition of expanded learning is, and also what exactly permissive ed code is, right? So we want to keep those in mind going forward. But the highlights here are just, the highest rated expanded learning programs take place in our state. So that's something to really take pride in and to be happy about. Some of the data that we're showing here is pre-pandemic around expanded learning programs, right? Over 4,500 sites serving on over 850,000 students. So, I mean, that's a ton of opportunities for students. We're really proud of that. These are academic opportunities. These are enrichment opportunities. A lot of great opportunities for students throughout the state just to learn and grow. And to the right, you'll see a map of California that shows the distribution of expanded learning programs throughout the state. And you'll see, right, some of these areas are smaller, but some are densely populated with a lot of programs, right? So our students are being served all throughout the state. And some of you may have wondered what those numbers symbolized on the map, right? So those stand for the 11 regions within California designated by the California County Superintendents. So within these regions are 16 county offices that support expanded learning programs, and you will have the opportunity to connect with them later today. Additionally, we have our statewide contractors that support the learning throughout the state. An example being this Academy series, right? And this is being supported by the California AfterSchool Network. So thank you again. Our other contracting party is ASAP Connect. And I also want to mention that we have our SSEL STEAM hubs, right? STEAM is highly prioritized throughout the state, and we have hubs throughout the state to help support the learning and growing of those opportunities. So when does this take place? So before school, after school, summer, and intersession, that's been our talking points for ACEs in 21st century for years. The addition that we've added now with ELO-P, we say more specifically non-school days, right? So now we're talking more about holidays and weekends, and really just an opportunity for students to get more access, right? So some of those spring break and winter break sessions where students might be at home and they could use something to do. We now have a new funding stream that not only allows but encourages LEAs to create some of those opportunities to provide learning for students. So the what is expanded learning and expanded learning opportunities? We look at an academic component, social, emotional, and physical needs and interests of students. So if you're looking at something more academic, something that comes to mind would be high dosage tutoring, just as an example, really meeting the critical needs of students that may need extra support within something they're learning within the school day. And then something physical could be CrossFit, right? I like to support high school programs, and having something that's designated and has a good title, and it's something that is popular, right? That really draws in attendance and engagement. How? So expanded learning opportunities should be hands-on, engaging, student-centered, results-driven, involve community partners, and complement learning activities in the regular school day and year. So complement, right? We like to make sure that we say expanded learning and not extended learning. So this should look different than the regular school day. This is really an opportunity for students to be really engaged with something that's a little more fun and something that doesn't take place during the school day. So previous slide, we talked about the STEAM hubs, science and technology, math, that's all important. That may look different and after school than it does during the school day, right? A lot more opportunity for robotics, right? Drones, any and all those things are great opportunities for students to learn and to do so in a different way. So before I pass it to Heather to talk about funding, I want to mention the quality standards for expanded learning in California. These really serve as the pillars for expanded learning and help support program design at all levels. This includes programmatic, staff, and participant level. And most of these slides you'll see have hyperlinks that take you directly to additional learning and resources as well. And lastly, these quality standards are really divided up into two categories, one being point of service, that's focused on the school-based level, and the other being programmatic, which is focused on the district or the CDO. And with that, I will pass it on to Heather.
Thanks. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about money. That's a very important part of making all of this happen. And so just wanted to highlight really high level. A lot of folks hear ELO-P and maybe, you know, ELO-P was their first introduction to expanded learning. It might be the only funding source that a particular district has, but it is not the only funding source for expanded learning. Expanded learning has been around for a while and is supported by multiple funding sources. And so important for folks to understand this, and also important, like if you're in a district, to understand, does your district have access to multiple funding sources, right? Because these are all funding sources for expanded learning. And so tomorrow we'll be talking more about one comprehensive program, but the intent is to talk about these as different funding sources to overall support expanded learning programming. So to support one comprehensive program. So we now have two different state funding sources. So the original state funding source was our ACES program, After School Education and Safety Program. A lot of you that have been in the field for a while are very familiar with ACES. This was kind of the envy of all the other states in our country because of the massive investment that was made by our state into after school expanded learning. And those are, that's ongoing, prioritizes TK through 8 students, competitive application, school-based awards. And I'm not going to read through all of this, but this, you can see kind of the breakdown of the different funding sources. And so Expanded Learning Opportunities Program was introduced, and so really adding just an exponential amount of funding into California to support nearly universal expanded learning programs, especially for our TK through 6 students. And then we also have our federal funds, the 21st Century Community Learning Centers, and those are split into 2 grant programs. There is an elementary middle program, and then what we call ASSETS, which is our program that supports high school students. And so those are the primary funding sources. And so we do have some of our schools that are actually funded by all 3 of these funding sources, which provides some really great opportunities. Some might have 2, some might have 1, but it's really important to know what your district has access to in terms of these funding sources. And then ELOG is federal and state COVID relief funding. And this, just mentioning this here because there's still a lot of confusion that exists between ELOG and ELO-P. So want to make it really clear, these are 2 separate funding sources. ELOG is one time. A lot of that funding is set to expire this year. And it went out to districts And even though it says Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant, it can actually fund a number of things, including expanded learning, but it is different than ELO-P, which is our ongoing funding stream specifically for expanded learning. So sometimes we ask districts, hey, do you have your ELO-P program plan? And then they might share something and it's actually their plan for ELO-G, two completely separate things. So also important to keep that in mind. So your district might also have access, probably does have access to ELO-G, but making sure you're clear what's ELO-G and ELO-P. Very soon ELO-G will expire and go away, and so hopefully that will alleviate some of the confusion, but just since some of those dollars are still floating around, important to know the distinction between those two. And then this just kind of shows, like at a glance, what that funding looks like. And so we have nearly $1 billion when you combine ACES and 21st Century. And right now with ELO-P, we are still maintaining the $4 billion investment. That's our investment for this year. That's the investment that's proposed for next year. And so you can see, and then there was 4.6 billion for ELO-G. That's those one-time grants. But so we have nearly $5 billion total investment in expanded learning ongoing in California, which is truly amazing, great investment. And even with a challenging budget year this year, so far, there's all the indications from our governor and the legislature that they are going to continue this investment at $4 billion. All right, so we have a few reflection questions for you all from the last couple sections. So just thinking about, you know, we shared out the quality standards. The quality standards really are the foundation of our program. So no matter what your funding source is, if you are running an expanded learning program, quality standards should be the foundation of what you are thinking about. And so just taking a moment to think about, you know, are you using the quality standards? Have you already picked one or two to focus on this year? Do you have some that you're thinking about focusing on next year? And then what funding sources do you currently leverage to support expanded learning opportunities? Could you leverage others? So again, sometimes districts aren't aware that they have both ELO-P and ACES funds. Do you know if your district has ACES funds? So just thinking about, are you aware of all the funding sources? And even that slide just covered our state and federal investments specifically for expanded learning. At the local level, there could be additional funding supports. There's a lot of folks that supplement their programs with foundation funding and fee funding. And so even though this is a large investment, we recognize there could be multiple funding sources, right? And also thinking about how you partner with other programs. So if you have any thoughts, feel free to drop some reflections into the chat box. If you have a quality standard in particular that you're focusing on, would love to see what people are. I'll just pull it up real quick. If you have a particular quality standard your team's focused on, maybe drop that in the chat box. If you have one you want to focus on next year, would love to see what everybody's thinking about. So quality standards. Maybe you're like, these are new to me, and so I need to dig into these, which if they are, we have a lot of resources. And so thanks, Sequoia quality staff this year and next. Yeah, that is, quality staff are really critical to have quality programs. Appreciate that. Right. While you all are thinking about this, oh, there we go. See, you just need one person, then it starts going. Thank you all for sharing and appreciating that. Safe and supportive environment, continuous quality improvement. Yeah. That's great. All right, so now we're going to jump into ELO-P basics a little bit. So again, ACES and 21st Century have been around for a while, and ELO-P is more recently introduced. And so it's what people are still kind of trying to understand. How does this program work? What is the intent? And so ELO-P funding, the intent is to ensure all districts provide expanded learning programs for their students. In particular, right now, this allocation goes to LEAs that serve students in grades TK through 6. So as long as your district has students in TK through 6, your district would receive ELO-P funding. And so it's to ensure that all students in California have equal access to comprehensive and transformative expanded learning programs. So that was the intent when ELO-P was announced back in May 2021. Really important. I think folks are more aware of this now, but we still stress this is an ongoing funding source for expanded learning programs. So we still occasionally hear feedback, oh, I thought that was like a 3-year program or a 5-year program, and then it was going away. No, the intent was, right, we're actually going to establish this ongoing funding source. So this is a permanent ongoing program. And as I mentioned earlier, right, we continue to see the investment of $4 billion. Already mentioned this, but we want to continue to reiterate this as well. ACES 21st Century and ELO-P should be considered a single comprehensive program. So if you have multiple funding streams, you should be looking at how you run those as a comprehensive program. Not my ACES kids are over here and my ELO-P kids are over here, but our district offers an expanded learning program and we fund that through these funding sources. And the intent again is to offer all students access to expanded learning programs, but because of the way the funding is structured, it does prioritize unduplicated students. And we'll get to that a little bit more. And then again, $4 billion, we'll just keep reiterating that because I know there's concerns with the budget, but as of right now, we are seeing that the investment is intended to maintain at $4 billion. It's based off of LEA's average daily attendance or ADA and unduplicated pupil percentage. And then you can access, and when the slide deck gets shared out, all these hyperlinks, you'll be able to click on them. So when you click on access the CDE website, that will take you to the part of the CDE website that lists the apportionments for this year. So you can see, for example, what any given district received in terms of how much ELO-P funding for the year. So it is important here to mention the way funding is currently structured for ELO-P. There's 2 tiers or 2 rates. And so we have tier 1 LEAs and tier 2 LEAs. Right now, those LEAs, and they're organized by a duplicated pupil percentage. And so tier 1 is any LEA that is greater than or equal to 75% unduplicated pupil percentage. And then tier 2 LEAs are those that are less than 75%. So depending on if you're tier 1 or tier 2, you have slightly different programmatic requirements, and we'll talk more about that later. And then your apportionment is funded slightly differently based off of the fact that you have different programmatic requirements. So we'll talk about offer and provide access later in more detail, but this shows you the calculation. So again, the apportionment is your rate based off of ADA, based off times the unduplicated pupil percentage. For our tier 1 LEAs, their rate is set at 2,750. For tier 2, the rate actually fluctuates each year because it's calculated after they calculate all of the tier 1 LEAs, whatever money is left, they then determine what the rate 2 is. And so that fluctuates year to year. This year it's $1,802.66, and it actually goes many decimal points beyond that. But the important thing to note here is, so right, that does fluctuate each year. We recognize this can be challenging for districts that are in the tier 2 classification, right? Having a fluctuating rate each year can make planning challenging. You're not sure exactly what your budget is going to be until actually the fiscal year starts. And so there is currently legislation being proposed, AB 2112, and someone from my team can drop in the legislation if folks are interested. But this particular bill is trying to target providing some amount of rate stabilization. So for those of you that fall into this tier 2, have the rate 2, if you've kind of struggled with planning because the rate fluctuates, we hear you, we understand that is a challenge. And so there is some legislation and some work happening to see if that might be addressed in future years. So if we're not getting into the weeds of that, but we have talked about it in other places. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can reach out to myself or someone on my team, Leslie and Malia, and we're happy to provide more information on that. All right, so that's kind of high level ELO-P. Now, Sterling, you get into the more of the weeds.
Thank you, Heather. I bring attention to my emoji is in a Zen state, so we're just going to stay as calm as we can as we go through some of the weeds here together. And I'm going to talk more about some of the requirements for ELO-P. So this is the slide that I referenced earlier as we were talking about the vision for expanded learning, right? Like that should be at the forefront as we're really doing the planning. You won't find the statutes that are going to create or allow a lot of specific program activity. The focus should be more on how to ensure that the planning is consistent with the funding source, the program, and local policies. And the planning should start really with the program plan. So as we go on to look at what the program plan does, LEAs are really going to want to make sure that they have all the people at the table. So those of you who have been on the ELO-P office hours have heard us reference many times, make sure it's in your program plan. Is it in your program plan? Who's helped you with your program plan? This is an opportunity for you to address those quality standards that we went through earlier, and then just to really focus on what's best for students in your community. Your district is usually different from any other district, even if it's a nearby district. So you know what's best for students and families, and really making sure that those needs are put at the forefront. One note that we'll make here is that there is a new version of the program plan being developed. So it will look a lot like the current program plan, but there will be additional prompts to really tease out some of those questions that you all ask us, and we say, you should know that. So we're going to ask you directly some of those questions to make sure that you are thinking explicitly about what's needed for your LEA. And I see a prompt at the bottom right-hand corner for a poll. So I think we're going to set up a poll to ask you all a question. That question being, LEAs that are working on their program plan should not include students to collaborate because their schedules are too busy, right? And what do you think? No, they can't understand how complicated the process is. Maybe, if and only if, they're middle school students, or C, they can provide important context and data. So getting some responses in. Give it a few more seconds before we end poll. Okay. And am I sharing, Heather, the results here? Can you all see it? Thumbs up. Great. Yes, they can provide important context and data for program opportunities. I think that's an easy one, right? Why not have students be at the table while you're making these decisions, right? And this will impact engagement and attendance, which we think is important. And in terms of folks kind of returning to program, they're more likely to do that if they were able to help plan for it. Next slide, please. So collaboration, this is also just important in terms of who you're working with. Partnership can mean fully operated by your district. It could mean partnerships with a CBO or just getting maybe some program support from vendors. Comprehensively, you can operate all the offerings or maybe just have additional staff coming in. So really just sitting down with your LEA, with your CBO partners, entertaining the idea of what it looks like to bring in additional folks to support the program. But this can look different from program to program, but really just give you all the notion that you should really be having those conversations and thinking strategically about what's best for your students. And specifically, the California State preschool program is one to look at as we're offering and providing access for the younger students at this time. And there are two program elements that we want to make sure that are at the forefront. Those are the educational and literacy elements. Again, the tutoring and the homework I mentioned earlier, the high dosage tutoring, and then also the educational enrichment element, again, the physical fitness, CTE, fine arts. One of the examples I would give just around this opportunity is being in years prior, there was art, what it looked like, all the coloring books and painting, but now with the influx of funding, you can now look at pottery, right, and sculpting, right? So those are both examples of art, but now we're looking at just more enhanced opportunities now that there's influx in funding. And the last note there is that snacks and or meals must be provided, and making sure that those are healthy. Next slide.
And Sterling, I think I'm going to interrupt you real quick because I've seen some questions in the chat box about program plans. And so I think some people are sending, and you all, if you're sending direct messages to myself or Sterling, we will try to read them, but we might not be able to catch them. So I would recommend dropping them into the full chat just to make sure they don't get lost. But there's questions. One, I want to highlight what Iqbal said, right? You can, it's a living document and definitely can be updated more frequently as long as approved by the LEA governing board and posted on the LEA website. And then there was a question of like, so the board needs to approve this every 3 years. And the answer is yes, at a minimum, the board needs to approve this every 3 years. But, if you're making minor modifications to your plan, it's a living document. It might not need full approval, but if you're making any sort of substantive change to your program plan, it does need to go back to the governing board, your school board, whatever that may be, and does need to be adopted by them in a public meeting and posted on the website. And, we recognize like that is a longer process that does take a long time, but part of the importance of that is to ensure it's a public meeting, that the public does have input, right? Our students, our communities, our teachers have input into the program plan so that it really is something developed with the entire community. Sterling, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about program plans.
I mean, we could do this all day just on this slide, but I appreciate you lifting that up. I did not see that in the chat. As you mentioned, it's tough for us to see all the messages, and I appreciate the system of support for inputting any of the links and messages that they're doing in the chat as well to help us move this along. So thank you both. And passing it to you for reflective.
So yeah, so a few reflection questions, and I'm going to start with the second one that's on here based off of what we were just talking about, right? How might you partner with members of your community to build out your program? So I was happy to see earlier when some of you all were mentioning quality standards, that a lot of you, or some of you, flagged youth voice and leadership, right? Youth voice and leadership is really important to us. That is a core component of our programs. How do we authentically engage youth in designing our programs? I think Bill said something, right? Like we should be doing things with students, not to them or for them. So thinking about your students, your communities, your parents, your families, community-based organizations that might be in your community, just different partners, how might you Maybe you already partner with them, so how could you increase your partnership with them? Or maybe you don't. Who might you need to start building partnerships with to build out your program? And then just thinking, and if you have any thoughts you want to share in the chat, definitely feel free to do that. Love to hear what you all are thinking. But then just thinking about where are you currently at in terms of implementing a program? Do you have a program plan? Does your program plan reflect what you are actually doing? Are you doing something significantly different than what's in your program plan? If you are, it's probably time to go back and look at that. As you saw some of the elements that are required for our programs, is there something you're missing? We've seen some districts really focus on the academic enrichment, like, oh, we're coming out of COVID, we really need to make sure we have high dosage tutoring and all of these academic components, but are you offering all of those other enrichment components? Or vice versa, maybe you're like, oh yeah, the kids are just out running around playing soccer and that's the extent of our program, and that's great, I'd love to have them physically active, but how do you introduce some of these other required elements as well? So just kind of thinking through, where are you at in terms of the program plan? Do you have the different components? Who have you engaged in your community? And so if you all feel like sharing any thoughts in the chat, love to hear what you all are thinking, but we'll keep moving along. So a few more components that we just wanted to share in terms of how these programs are expected to run. One is days and hours of program operation. So ELO-P, if you're offering a program funded through ELO-P, the program needs to be offered on all school days, in person, before and or after school. So it can be a combination that's no less than 9 hours. So your core day plus expanded learning hours equals 9 hours. So let's just say on a given school day, your average given school day, it's about 6 hours. You need to supplement with 3 hours then of expanded learning. So you might say, oh, we really need our students, our community, they need about 30 minutes of before school time. That's when parents want to drop them off. We want to, embed school breakfast. And so we're going to run 30 minutes before the core day. Okay, well, then that sets you up to need to run 2.5 hours after the core day so that you can meet that 9-hour requirement. So, and that can fluctuate, right? It doesn't have to be the same every single day. This really is where you get to customize something based off of what your community needs. So this is where you might engage parents and families, like what hours do your students actually need access to programs? Maybe your schedule starts later, and so it's actually more important to have a full hour or more time before school, and then parents pick up their kids earlier, so you maybe don't need to offer as late into the day. So just thinking about how do you structure your hours to best meet the needs of your community. Then there's our non-school days in person, and so that needs to be at least 30 days. And as Sterling mentioned earlier, we're kind of using this phrase non-school days to say, like, summer is a popular time to offer these programs, but it could be intersession, it could be any break, it could be any non-school day. And so if you're offering a program through ELO-P, it needs to be at least 30 days, and each of those days no less than 9 hours, inclusive of extended school year days and Saturdays. And I know this is where there starts to be a lot of technical questions. And so if you have technical questions about this, there's likely an FAQ that covers it. And if the FAQ doesn't cover it, these are examples of some of the stuff we get into in office hours as well. In person, students have to be in person, but programming can be provided in a variety of formats. So we often hear like, oh, what if our students are at home? Can they join virtually? For the ELO-P funding, the students must be in person. Now, if you are live streaming, like if you have a special guest, like facilitating, I think question one time was like, oh, what if we have someone that wants to teach the kids cooking and they're on Zoom? They're in another part of the state or another stayed all together. Can we Zoom them in? Yes, you could definitely do that, but the students must be in person. So just some things to think about in terms of days and hours of program operation. And I might have given away the answer, but Melissa, knowing we have a poll. So can we launch that poll? All right. When students are in person for ELO programs, they can engage in virtual opportunities if qualified staff is present and in ratio. Ooh, I thought this was a giveaway, but I'm seeing a few different responses. I'm sure Michael Funk is very happy for anybody that's selecting option B. All right, still seeing answers coming in, so I'll give it a few more seconds. All right, I think we're slowing down, so I'm going to end the poll and share results. So this was maybe a little bit more of a trick question than the last one, but it looks like overwhelmingly you all got it correct. So if students are in person for the programs, they can engage in virtual opportunities if qualified staff is present and in ratio. So that's the example that I talked about. So if you are, on site, your students are all on site, and you have a chef, for lack of a better example, since I already used that one, that's zooming in virtually to teach, to provide programming, that is something that could happen, right? As long as the students themselves are in person. And Michael, there's 3 people that specifically would like your approval. All right. Stop sharing. Okay. And I see lots of activity in the chat, and I see our SSEL folks responding to questions. Thank you. Ooh, 10 days for spring break. Love that. So yeah, lots of good examples of how you all are breaking up the days and hours of operation. All right, frontier expectations. So do want to know, I just went through all of those things, but if you are a program located in a frontier designated geographical location, which is explained here what that is, the program requirements are shifted slightly, and it's no less than 8 hours of combined time for the school days and 8 hours for the non-school days. So just on the last slide where everything said 9 hours, if you're frontier designated, well, those shift to 8-hour requirements instead. All right. This is some of my favorite stuff. We get so many questions about this. Student participation. Every student is eligible to participate. There's no reason why a student is prohibited from participating in an expanded learning program. We a lot of times get questions like, oh, we've served the ELO-P kids. Can we serve more kids? All of our students are ELO-P kids. Technically, they're all eligible. They can all participate. So again, we'll get into the offer and access requirements, which might outline how you need to prioritize offering and providing access. But once you've met the minimum requirements for offer and provide access, you can expand the program to any student. And then also important, actual attendance is based on the individual needs of students and families. There are no minimum requirements for attendance for ELO-P. So we get a lot of folks, again, who are like, oh, if my kid's only participating for 30 minutes, does that count for ELO-P? There are no attendance requirements for ELO-P, so it doesn't necessarily matter if your kid counts or not. So their attendance is based on the individual needs of students and families. That being said, there are considerations for running a comprehensive program. And so tomorrow we'll be talking more specifically about running a single comprehensive program. That does mean you have to consider multiple requirements, but one of the things that we get a lot of questions about is like, oh, the ELO-P kids can leave at like whenever they want, and the ACES kids need to stay till 6. That is based off of an old assumption, based off of some really old guidance that has been updated. And so CDE has clarified guidance on early release policies. And so even if you are running a program and it is funded by ACES, your site might have to be open until 6, but kids can leave early as long as it's in alignment with your early release policy. So you might need to update your early release policy. And again, we can get into more of the weeds of that, but the funding streams can work well together to allow flexibility for our students to attend based on their individual needs and to leave early. And then just want to make a note, this can get a little confusing also when you're thinking about using multiple funding sources, right? Family fees, what students are prioritized. ACES in 21st Century talks about one thing, ELO-P talks about unduplicated pupils. What does that all mean? And so this little chart, and then again, there's things on here that are hyperlinked, so you can go and read more details when we share this slide deck. ACES in 21st Century prioritizes students that are eligible for FRPM, and migrant and homeless youth, just a note, are automatically designated FRPM eligible. So they're included in that list. A lot of times we'll see them, homeless youth, called out separately, but they're kind of embedded in FRPM eligibility already. And then foster youth. And so those are the students that need to be prioritized for ACES in 21st Century enrollment. When we talk about ELO-P, that's based off of, the funding is based off of unduplicated pupils, which is based off of FRPM, foster youth, and English learners. And so that is the distinction, right? Is if you're talking about including unduplicated pupils, it includes English learners. There's also some recent legislation that says homeless youth need to be prioritized for intercession programs. And we can share more details on that if folks want the specifics. I believe CDE has an FAQ in the works on that one. I'm looking at Sterling. Okay, he nodded. And then fees, regardless of the funding source, the answer for fees is the same no matter what. You cannot charge foster youth, students eligible for FRPM, including migrant and homeless youth, fees. And so you can charge fees, but you cannot charge it to those particular student groups. This means technically fees can be charged to English learners if they do not fit into one of the other above categories. So I know this has caused confusion in the past, so trying to put this out hopefully more clearly than it has been in the past. You can charge fees to English learners. Should you? That's up to you. There's a lot of conversation about should you charge fees or not. If you do charge fees, it should be on a sliding scale based on ability to pay. So just noting, because I think there's been confusion about some of the fee stuff. So hopefully this kind of splits that up to provide a little more clarity. So yes, Ed code is clear. You can charge family fees. You cannot charge family fees to the particular groups listed. And if you do charge fees, they should be on a sliding scale. All right, Sterling. So we've talked about a whole bunch of stuff. And a lot of times it's like, oh, how do I put all these things together? So we have this fun summer schedule.
Thank you, Heather. Yes, we have a fun summer schedule. Just wanted to also just highlight some things you said. Really want to make sure you're getting family input when you're designing schedules and opportunities, because that's going to really determine when you should be providing access before or after school and some of these breaks that we're talking about, these non-school days. And then also the virtual component. I went on a summer visit where there were students were present, there was supporting staff, and they were doing art with Pixar, right? So just another example of using like some other component other than the staff that's in the room. There was virtual in the sense they were using, I think it was maybe YouTube, but they were using Pixar to help students kind of draw some animation. This summer schedule. So we wanted to give everyone an opportunity to kind of sink their teeth into something and have an example of what a program could look like for the summer and their schedule. You can see towards the bottom here, letting you know what the colors symbolize. So yellow is for all students, this meaning that any of the age groups that are present can attend this offering. Purple is for TK through 3rd, and then blue is for 4th grade through 8th grade. And so just taking a look at the summer schedule, you'll notice each day starts at 7 to 7:45 for a drop-off, really just getting the students situated for arrival, 7:45 to 8:30. I'm looking at Monday now. Breakfast, 8:30 to 9, outside play. And here you're getting into more, I would say, the specifics in terms of offering. So tennis and golf, 9 to 12. And so you'll notice that's for all students, right? That might look differently for your TK and K, right? As opposed to your 7th and 8th graders. They might be wanting to do that more competitively, where some of the younger students are just getting used to footwork and holding a racket or a golf club. And then 9 to 12, you can see is Quest Game, right? So that's for 4th through 8th. And you'll notice that that's happening at the same time as the 9 to 12 tennis and golf. So here's just an example of how students that are older might want to do something specific to their age group. And then the LEA is also saying, but if you want to do tennis and golf, that's available as well. 12 to 1 is lunch for all. 1 to 2 again for TK to 3rd. I'm assuming this is more of a dance program. At the same time, there's an opportunity for 4th through 8th, which is theater. So given on this day, you'll see it's divided. That first group there is just for TK through 3rd, and then the theater is just for 4th through 8th. And 4 to 5:30 is a staff planned event and opportunity. So giving some flexibility and opportunity for your staff to be creative. And this allows for your staff to take on feedback from the students as programming is happening, right? Maybe they wanted more tennis, and that's something you can put into the schedule for the next week or the next day, more of the Quest game, or something that hasn't been planned that they want to have more time doing. And then 5:30 is the pickup time. So I won't go through each day in that type of detail, just given time constraints. But again, I think we've been showing in the chat that this will be available for you all to take a look at and really break down how this example is supporting students at different ages, right? So we're going from TK through 8. The program is designed to support and prioritize TK through 6. So here's an LEA that's supporting 7th and 8th grade as well. You'll see that there are opportunities here where it's 2 different options for TK through 3rd that are overlapping. So, you might have students that are more inclined to do art, maybe something that's more calm and they're sitting down, and others that want to be more active. So those things are happening at the same time and giving students some choice. And then on some days, you'll notice there's more opportunity and choice for the older students versus the younger, and then also flipping to the younger versus older. So I think we're going to go and launch a poll to ask you all a question about this summer schedule. And that question is, what time does the summer program start? So what time does it start? We've got 7 a.m. because that's when students arrive. We have 7:45 because that's when breakfast starts. And we have 8:30 because that's when the fun stuff starts. We're going to go ahead and keep that open for a little bit. Okay, got most people saying 7. We got some people at 7:45. Does breakfast symbolize the program? perhaps give it another 5 seconds or so. See, we're starting to slow down. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. Share results. Okay, answer is A, because that is when the students arrive. Breakfast is important, and it is a component of the program, but the program is actually starting when the students arrive, which is at 7 a.m. And at this time, I think we're going to show the next slide that has some additional questions, and maybe put some of those in the chat or have some dialogue. Heather and I will kind of go back and forth here about what we see on this program calendar.
And we've actually only got 4 minutes left, and I know we have a bunch of other slides. So there is good questions on this slide to think about. And I think the last thing I'll say about the summer sample schedule is it's a good example of going above and beyond, right? So what are the minimum requirements? And then how do we do more? So like, you know, how long is it? There's definitely more than 9 hours in there each day. So these are some good questions for folks to think about as they're going back. When you get this slide deck, you can go back and look through these questions and reflect on some of these things.
Yes.
Someone said a literacy component, and yes, it may not be super clear, but 916 Inc. is actually a literacy program. All right, so we'll run through the next few slides quickly.
So noting time, staffing requirements, just want to elevate that there's a 20-to-1 ratio student to staff for all grades except for TK and K, which is 10-to-1. Staff should meet the basic requirements of an instructional aide, and there is flexibility within LEA policies for them to create what that means. So for the instructional aide classification and exam, LEAs are allowed to create their own exams. So that can be targeted to the type of folks that you want to be supporting your students throughout the day. Offer, so offer and provide access, which will be the next couple of slides, kind of the crux of the program. We have FAQs on this as well. So if I go through this quickly, you also have access to this going forward. But offer means to recruit and really advertise the program, and making sure you're doing so culturally and linguistically, and in appropriate communication channels. So, you know, we've seen this being done through Parent Square. This can be online, the district's website. Some people can mail out a hard copy. Folks that show up for registering for school or any school component, the LEA has included the ELO program offering in there as well. So those are just a few examples for offer. Provide access means to enroll in ELO-P. So if a parent or guardian has a signed ELO-P registration form and that form is on file, then the student shall be considered enrolled in the program. And so that's, you know, that's really why we try to encourage LEAs to do this alongside some of the instructional day paperwork that they need for parents to sign off on. If those things are done at the same time, then this allows for all your students to be able to sign up for a program and be enrolled. The second part for provide access is primarily for LEAs that have multiple school sites, or maybe they aren't providing this opportunity at all sites. So for here, for an LEA receiving an ELO-P apportionment, transportation shall be provided for any student who attends a school that is not operating an ELO-P to attend a location that is providing an ELO-P, and to return to their original location or another location that is established by the LEA. So LEAs are encouraged to provide access at all of their school sites, right? Transportation becomes an issue if an LEA has multiple school sites and does not provide access at all of the school sites. If they have program operating at all the school sites, then transportation is not the issue. If they decide they have, let's say, 5 program sites and they only want to operate at 3 of them, then for the other 2, they would have to make sure that those students are being provided access by transportation, and that would be from those 2 schools to one of the schools that is providing access and returning to their original site or a location that has been decided by the LEA. I know that there are sometimes other questions about that, but that is the basics for transportation. And I'm going to pass it back to Heather to talk about funding tiers.
Thanks, Sterling. Yeah, so we've definitely gotten into the weeds questions about transportation at office hours. So again, that's a good space to come to if you have like a very specific question. Already showed this earlier, but just want to throw this back up because we said we would. And so now you can see the offer and provide access. So if you're in tier 1, you need to offer to all students in TK through 6 access to the programs and provide access to any student whose parent or guardian requests placement in a program, as Sterling just went through what offer and provide access mean. Tier 2, the primary difference is unduplicated students. So for tier 2, it's offer to at least all unduplicated students, provide access to any unduplicated student. And this goes back to the whole thing of you can go above and beyond. So once you have offered and provided access to any unduplicated student, if you're a tier 2 LEA, you could still provide it to any student once you've met the offer and access minimum requirements. We usually get a lot of questions about compliance and monitoring. And so beginning fiscal year 23-24, the year we are in, LEAs are subject to program auditing. FPM monitoring review should have an asterisk there, edit that. But day 3 of our academy is going to talk all about this. So if you've been waiting to hear about this, Josh and Iqbal from the CDE Expanded Learning Division are going to get into all of the weeds. So for those of you that have been waiting for all of those compliance oriented questions, that is going to be your session you want to make sure you're at. Then we have a bunch of resources. So again, once this goes out, you can click on those different hyperlinks and access various different resources. New FAQs are always in the work. That's Sterling's favorite thing to do as part of his job. He's always taking questions from office hours and the inbox and sorting through those and coming up with new FAQs to get all of your questions answered. So be on the lookout for more of those. And with that, I think, Melissa, we're ready to start wrapping up.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just remove spotlights for a moment. And thank you everyone for participating in today's workshop. We are going to start transitioning into our regional breakouts. And so again, shout out to Sterling Williams and Heather Williams. We had the Williams crew today supporting us with ELO-P, FAQs, nuts and bolts. And so if you can advance slides, thank you, Heather. But before we open regional breakouts, we live and breathe CQI, continuous quality improvement, and we greatly appreciate your feedback. If you are planning to attend the rest of the workshops, I would recommend completing this feedback form at the end of day 4 on April 18th. Otherwise, you can provide us your feedback now if you're only attending today. You can scan the QR code and we'll also drop the link in the chat in just a moment. And next slide, please. So regional breakouts. Regional breakouts will begin in just a few moments. And so if you are not familiar with what region you are a part of, we have the